Welcome to our early panel, part of the Mages track. Thank you, MAGFest, for having us. I am supposed to remind everyone that, today or later in the guidebook, please remember to rank talks that you see so that they know whether or not to invite us back or to not invite us back, etc. But there's some sort of star system, and you can leave comments. So do that for every panel and show you see this weekend. If you have walked into this room and sat here, hopefully you are here to see engaging fandoms, creating stories for an established audience. With Bonnie Bogovich, Liz Rischel, and Marjorie. As I mentioned to those of you who were here earlier, in case we lose technology or you want to show people slides later, we have a viewable link, tinyurl.com/EF for engaging fandoms, MAG19. And in case you forget, I copy-pasted that into the bottom corner of every slide. So, we are your speakers today. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Morning. I'm Bonnie Bogovich.
I'm Liz Rischel.
And I'm Marjorie Rischel.
I'm going to move this mic closer.
Thank you.
Yay.
And you probably know us best from being the creators behind Super Smash Opera.
Woo! And its sequel, Aria Kart.
The Super Smash Opera and Aria Kart were our works that use the Nintendo franchise and combine it with the music of well-known and beloved operas. All these different operas from all over the place. So we did that in 2015, 2016, and then the sequel, Aria Kart, last year.
Kart. Guess what it was about? And thank you again, MAGFest, for having us for all those performances. Other works that we're going to reference in this talk that are kind of related on a similar plane. I made a very messy slide. Apologies. Include the Block Choir, currently represented in the front row, which is a chicken choir based on the Muppet Show idea of chicken choruses are awesome. Also mixed with the fact that they only sing choir arrangements and they can only speak the word block. So hence Block Choir. Through the Materia Collective, who is also represented at MAGFest. And then we have a couple others.
All right. In 2015, we, primarily Liz and Bonnie, launched Evenings in Quarantine, the zombie opera.
It was 2010.
Oh, I'm sorry. 2015
2010.
was the premiere of Smash Opera. 2010 was the premiere of Evenings
too
in
many
Quarantine.
shows.
Yes. Timelines. All right. So this was sort of a fan work as it was inspired by zombie culture and the idea of zombies and the rising zombie fandoms.
And we're from Pittsburgh, so George Romero is like God there, so Night of the Living Dead.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And the next work listed is Draconis Wicked. That's my original online graphic novel. It is a new story with new characters, but it also sort of fits fan and parody works because all of the stories and conventions are based on the stories and quests from popular adventure games and RPGs. Very video game inspired for any of you out there who might like games.
Some of you might. I don't know.
And then the other works that we've worked on was the Dracula podcast radio play, which was a fully acted, essentially a full experience immersive audiobook where all of the characters are played by different actors in the it's released as a podcast sequentially by chronological order.
And that is different because in the original book,
yeah, in the original
not.
book, it's mostly chronological, but a few things are taken out of order, so we had some decisions to make. And then the whole thing is enriched by sound effects and music to help bring the story to life. And then the last project, my pet project, is Steam or the Spectres of the Knox Mill, which is a steampunk ghost story opera.
Historical fiction
Opera that we're working on that is being told in small YouTube segments. One of them's up right now. We've been working on one for a long time. And so lots of music.
Yeah. So, and obviously a lot of things are tying all these together, and that is fandom and existing genres, and we're going to dig a little deeper into all of that. So, hey, it's 10 a.m., you're at a panel, why are we here? Seriously, why are we all here? And we're going to share what we've learned while making, creating, and doing our projects, especially since a lot of them are based on existing IP. And what are the specific details we're going to talk about? Well, in this presentation, we want to help you have some guides and tips in writing satisfying fan works and derivative works that's satisfying for you and your audience. Also, making sure that what you're creating appeals to an audience. And, things to consider when using pre-established worlds. Also, we're going to keep using this word through the talk, derivative work. Hopefully people at MAGFest kind of understand this word already. But to clarify, a new original work based on or inspired by an existing work. It can be a single story or franchise, like Super Smash Opera is based on the Nintendo Super Smash Bros. Characters, or a broad genre. We mentioned we use the George Romero-specific idea of how zombies behave for zombie opera. And the topics we're going to cover in order: rules of the world, working with pre-existing ideas. We're going to talk about story structure, when to use it and why, and then we're going to wrap it up with the important final result of making anything your audience and you, so you can know, define, and respect your audience.
Okay, so I'm going to kick us off talking about the rules of our world. Certain things. So again, this is not necessarily writing 101. I know a lot of you are writers, so we're not necessarily going to get into here's how to do the 3-act structure and stuff like that, but we're going to be sharing some anecdotes about how we learned, either the hard way or the easy way, how to kind of balance when you're writing your stories where people already have expectations. So the rules of your world. Your first step is to engage your passions. This is pretty much the most obvious, is that you want to really find what speaks to you specifically, and carry that little spark, because that spark is going to be something that you have to refer to over and over again as things get more tangled down the line, as your story changes and morphs. Carry the impetus for your need to create. So the picture that I have here is from me and Bonnie and 2 of our friends who worked on the Dracula podcast. We had just finished doing kind of a wrap-up. But when we did the Dracula podcast, the impetus for doing that was that we loved the book so much, and we loved the way it handled things and balanced characters. Yes?
And I would also like to point out that that is not a graphic. Liz loves bats and Dracula so much. That's in her living room.
Yeah, that's my wall.
She has bat decals all over her wall. We're literally just standing in her living room.
Yes, that's not a green screen. So we love the book so much, and we were never really quite happy with what movies have done with it.
Keanu Reeves.
They're a much shorter way of telling a story, so they had to make the characters more potent, and that kind of eliminated a lot of their nuance. And we felt like that a lot of the subtlety was gone from the book, and we really needed to do it our own way. And we helped out with another project, and that just kind of whetted our appetite. We needed to do more, and we needed to delve deeper into Dracula. We found a lot of people who shared the same passion. Because we did it as a radio play, and people could record at a distance and send their recordings to us, sometimes from the UK. It meant that,
thank you, Brian.
It meant that we could find people from all over who had the same passion that we did, and we weren't encumbered by having people that, because of close proximity, they wanted to be on the project, but they weren't super passionate about it. So that kind of ties in with a lot of my points. How did other adaptations handle your particular interests? Were you satisfied with what they did? What is it that you want to bring out that you feel that other people missed? And again, talking about proximity especially, avoid the IPs. I say the word IP. If you don't know, that means intellectual property. So the franchises, the characters, the works. Avoid the IPs you don't like. As a creator and as a collaborator, if you're not super passionate about it, you don't want to dilute other people's passion. And if you're like, oh, I don't like this, I hate this thing, I'm going to do a roast, it's just not going to be as good, because it's not coming from a place of love. And if you don't actually know what you're talking about, you won't really know how to poke fun at it in a fun way.
Yeah. And go ahead, Marsh.
People who parody things that they hate, they sometimes come across to me as a 10-year-old saying, I don't like your thing, I'm gonna make fun of it, and nobody wants to watch that for 20 minutes.
Yeah, and also I think we've all been to talks or shows where you can tell the actor or the presenter is not into what they're talking about, and it just ruins the experience for the audience, because they want to see you being happy and enjoying something that you're actually passionate about, not slaving away and being forced to present something.
And I'm sure we've also seen movies where you kind of feel like a lot of the writing team didn't really understand the original subject material, and then you who did is just,
yeah, they're killing your dreams.
Don't kill your dreams. moving on.
Moving on. Don't kill dreams.
Okay, so now that you have that passion, it's time to set the tone of the world. And the tone, you're all writers mostly, so you know what it is, but it's the overall mood of your story. Is it a comedy? Is it a horror? Is it stylized? Is it quirky? So you want to find the tone, and your audience might actually have a preconceived tone. They may have an expectation of what your tone is going to be because of what franchise you're using or what genre you're using. And sometimes that can be kind of troublesome, because the pictures that we picked here are from Bonnie and my 2010 show, Evenings in Quarantine, the Zombie Opera, which was an unapologetically dramatic and horror, scary show, as you can probably tell from the top picture. But the audience coming in, it was written at a time when there were a lot of zombie comedies coming out, and a lot of people thought it was a comedy. And we love audiences. Sometimes they try to help you, especially when you're live and they're like, okay, I'm walking into a comedy, and they sit down and they're like, that wasn't very funny, but I'm going to help them out anyway. Good job.
While everyone else is sitting there in horror like,
and we had no previous...
That guy just lost an arm.
We had no real experience previously with that phenomenon. Yeah. And sometimes we could get them to understand what tone we were really trying to lay down, and sometimes we couldn't. So, you just got to stay the course and roll with it. And then take your notes and look at it next time. So, within your tone palette, Marjorie mentioned when we were discussing this talk that your tone palette, it's kind of easy to think about it in terms of colors. Yeah. If you have your color palette set out, you want to make sure that you don't have dissonant elements with the tone and your theme, for that matter.
It's very easy to think of tone as color. You pick what your main color is going to be, and you don't overwhelm it with other colors, but you don't make it just one color either, or it might be dull and flat and lose interest. And you want to be very careful about using clashing colors. Right. And if you use too many of them, you get a gray mess instead of making any of your ideas stand out.
And I think the whole color theory applies. Use complementary colors. Don't jump right from one thing to the broad end of the spectrum and back, because you might really confuse your audience into what direction you're now taking your show in.
Right. And so within your boundaries, though, that you've set for yourself in terms of tone, don't be afraid to have moments of levity in your horror movie or project, or moments of bring the action down. Give the audience some breaks. When we did, I'll get back to that. The bottom picture is another character, the sort of comic relief character in our dramatic show. And she herself, even though she's kind of silly, is also pretty dark. She's dark and quirky in her own way, and we used her to fit the mood of what it was that we were trying to do. If she were way too different, then it would have been difficult to keep people within the genre that we're working in.
And specifically, so zombies are attacking and the world's exploding, basic zombie premise. And Emily's character there, who was Angela?
Yeah.
Angela, it's been a while, my God, almost 10 years, guys. She was the party girl, and you know how you see all those zombies movies, and there's always someone who's partying and not taking things seriously, and they're the ones that are going to get it. So that was Emily. Yeah. And it was sort of funny because she basically sings the song Last Call. Yeah. And zombies attack during a party, and it's sort of funny, but then it doesn't take us long after that. We get right back to the dark.
Right.
Yeah.
So then we have to look at tone changes. Tone changes within your world. This is a little bit basic, but it's also especially true for derivative works, that you do have to adjust them carefully and make sure that you are breaking your tension with a reason. When we did Aria Cart, the character that I played, Wendy Koopa, had a very heartfelt aria, but we didn't want people to feel like this show is taking a turn, so we broke the tension immediately with a joke as soon as Bonnie came on stage. Yeah. We didn't want that mood to linger, but it was there to give the audience a bit of a break and let their cheek muscles relax a little bit.
We also learned if you ever want to break a romantic moment, just bring Wario in. Wario, wah! Wario can break tension.
Make sure everyone's on the same page with what the mood and tone and changes and breaks are.
Wario is the human record scratch.
Yeah. He actually sounds like, wah!
Yeah.
That's true. That's a good way
Yeah. Cool. All
moving on.
right. So making the
Rules.
rules that support your tone and theme. So the first rule I have, as kind of an example, is zombies don't sing, and other hard and fast rules. So this is not necessarily like what's your writer's Bible. Making sure that the mood of your show is clear by not suddenly having the zombies break into some musical number. You can't bring the audience back from that. You've just written a comedy, whether you like it or not. So that it will also there was a lot that goes into making sure that straight characters stay very, focused, that they don't make jokes, that they don't break character, and if they do, then it's once you firmly establish them. I'll get more into that later. Keep your jokes relevant, because if something's pop culture funny and you're doing a comedy, that'll be great at the moment, but some people won't kind of like it because they like for everything to match. So make sure that if you throw in a pop culture reference, it's still tied in with your franchise in some way or another.
Is that the link?
Yeah. So when at the end of, do you want to tell the story?
So oh gosh. So we have this lovely dramatic moment. We have the Fire Flower duet. Link is finally
Super Smash Opera original.
Link and Zelda are finally maybe going to, acknowledge their relationships, possibly if he's even interested. And she insults him, and I pull out the "Excuse me, princess." And technically, that's not a line that's ever used in any of the video games, but it's used in the cartoon, and a lot of people who know that and have seen it repeated on YouTube, they get it. But we don't. But we don't do that all the time. We still keep the video game basis as the main pad of the show.
Yeah, the games themselves are the core universe, and then the cartoons, the comic books, the movies, those are almost like that second orbit, and you've sort of got to make a rule for yourself. Am I only pulling from that first orbit, or am I pulling from the first two, and how often should I pull from the second orbit?
And the Fox thing.
Yeah, and then Fox makes a joke of what the fox doth say. And
Heed
because
to
what
what
the fox
the fox
say
doth
had
say.
just come out on Super Smash Up.
Yeah,
But he's a
funnier in
fox,
2015.
So it kind of worked with his character because he was a fox.
If any other characters had made the joke, I think it would have fallen flat. But having him passionately sing "What doth the fox say" is
And Reset.
it works.
It was fun.
Yeah.
As long as you have ties to your story. So artistic choices. If you don't have a Hollywood budget, you're going to have some limitations within your medium, but you can use them as opportunities because now you have parameters set and you can be creative within them. And it's okay if these decisions are made out of necessity, like not having any money. When we were talking about Super Smash Opera originally, we said, okay, we are not going to have the money to build cosplay costumes for everybody. We need to make decisions about the style of what our show is going to be based on the fact that we aren't going to be able to build everything or hire somebody to build everything. We don't have a budget. But I had a bunch of curtain material. And so we said, why don't we lean hard into the opera theme with our costumes? And so the picture of Fox, it's a little bit hard to tell when it's being projected this way. If you open the all of our pictures are on our Facebook and stuff anyway, but his jacket, his Fox jacket, has like kind of an embroidery brocade looking thing on top and on the bottom, because that was the fabric I had available to me, but I kept it consistent for all of the characters, and everybody knew who they were.
Yeah, and what was really easy is when I'm telling our cast what to wear, we just said basic puppet show blacks. We all wore basic black pants, black shirts, sometimes black gloves, because we could easily throw on pieces on top of ourselves. And some of us, like me, would have 4 costume changes in a show right after each other, and I just have to remove the little layer that identifies me as what I am without having to change my pants and do everything else. And so by going with a simplistic costume style, it made the show faster, and it was easier for you to really make those things pop, because Liz designed all our costumes.
And we had a lot of quick changes in that show, so it was helpful to not have them be exact. The limited cast decisions were another thing. We built that show based on who was going to MAGFest. And then we structured the show around who needed to be changing at the time that somebody else was on the stage. But
yeah, I mean, that's not necessarily cheaping out either. Like, even Shakespeare wrote his plays based on who he knew would be in his acting company that season.
Yeah.
So too with us. Okay,
Us
so
and Shakespeare.
Yeah, there you
respecting
go.
our characters. So you're working with somebody else's intellectual property, and you actually have to give them more respect because they're somebody else's and they're being lent to you, a precious commodity. Use your characters with purpose. When we did Aria Kart, we wanted Captain Falcon to be one of the commentators. And even though he wasn't from Aria Kart, he has a racing game, and that was the tie-in. We wanted someone who was impartial, and we kept his character consistent, or at least consistent with among itself and tied to the game. Respect the rules of the characters you develop. Next to Captain Falcon is Lakitu. Lakitu doesn't have much of a personality in the games. He kind of does what he does. Yeah. So we developed kind of like a rule book nerd personality for Lakitu and kept that consistent too. We respected that character just as much as the ones that aren't ours.
Just because we made the rules doesn't mean we, can break them whenever we want. We have to keep personalities consistent, or it's bad writing.
And also, what I liked was when Liz and me were playing those two characters, is because they were characters separated enough that never actually raced a car in the game, it allowed us to be co-commentators for a reason. It's like, well, we're here. We're not going to get in a car, but we'll just stand to the side and make comments every once in a while and have a duet.
And part of that was so we could play off of each other and have a duet, and part of it was so that somebody could interview somebody while the other person changes for the next scene.
Yeah.
Working in the limitations.
Yeah.
And never underestimate the audience's affection for bit characters.
Oh, God, yeah.
When Waluigi came out on stage, spoiler, people didn't even hear the entire company's last line because everyone was so excited to see their favorite character.
Oh my God,
we discovered that a lot in the first Smash Opera. When Fox McCloud walked out on stage, he started delivering his line and then he had to stop because everyone was so excited to see Fox. It's just the excitement of seeing that character, your character on the stage, there, who can see you and look at you, even if it's an actor playing them. There's nothing like that.
It is a big world, and every character, no matter how small or insignificant or seemingly unlikable to you, is somebody's favorite.
Yeah. So also, first impressions are important. Tweak them later if you want, but make sure that you don't tweak a character's personality and make them do something out of character in the first scene. Yep. So next we have the callback characters. So if you are working on a sequel or something and you're deciding to make it a little bit different, like we did for Aria Kart, we had Piranha Plant as the callback character to Jigglypuff in the first show. It was the only song that was repeated in the second one because Piranha Plant sang the Jigglypuff song. This is actually Madam Butterfly. So she sang Madam Butterfly at the end, and it was the catharsis of Jigglypuff's arc. 2 years ago.
Except I did it in the piranha voice, which was a little less melodic, but it worked out.
It was fun because it was still funny, even if you didn't get the reference, and if you got the reference, it was twice as funny.
Some people were like, oh my God, it's like she's living again. It has a plan.
So those are a few of the things that we discovered setting up the rules of our world. Okay.
Should we just breeze through this one?
Yeah, so we also decided to engage multiple disciplines because we both like all of us are opera fans as well. The songs, just as much as the characters, were used with purpose. That we picked songs that related thematically to the moments within their original show that they related to in our show. The Queen of the Night song that Zelda sings, which was originally Mozart's Magic Flute, was very gender-loaded within the context of its time, and she was upset in the story about not being taken seriously by Ganondorf. The Pikachu song, they sing the song that Papageno sings in the Magic Flute, which is animal noises.
Pikachu, Pikachu. Meanwhile, in the opera,
Papageno.
Gee, hard adaptation, huh?
So people who knew the original could appreciate how we used it in context. And then Wendy, the song that she sings, the aria, is a song about her father. And the original song, O mio babino caro, from Johnny Skiki, is a song that the girl sings to her father. So we wanted to keep that father link between the two shows.
So I guess the big takeaway here is if you're doing anything that's like a story crossover or a genre crossover, it's really great to look for things from like medium A that matches medium B and try to connect them together as much as possible. Like, look for those matching puzzle pieces.
Cool. All right.
Take it
moving on.
away, Marge.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about story structure. And as Liz mentioned earlier, this isn't going to be a whole lot of academic stuff about, story act A and, the rising, falling action, so on. This is just going to be largely the purpose of structuring your story and when your audience enjoys structure and when your audience does not enjoy structure. So, move on to the next slide. Weaving your ideas, though, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to leave you the slides there.
Oh, sure.
and
I'll be there. I'll
All right.
push the button.
Thank you for button pushing. Cool.
All right, teamwork.
Weaving your ideas. So, I'm going to do a very brief metaphor here. When I was an art student, I took a class on actual loom weaving. And there's like a lot of different steps you have to do with like measuring and tying your yarn. Like actually weaving the strands back and forth on the loom is like step 5. I was in a class that was a mix of experts and beginners, and my instructor told us, hey, everybody in this group, if you're a beginner, you start on step 5. Somebody else is going to do step 1, 2, 3, and 4 for you. And that sounds a little unintuitive, that if you're starting a class, you'd think you'd want to learn the whole process from beginning to end in order. But she explained to us, if you don't try step 5, you won't understand enough of how steps 1 through 4 work to do it on your own. Mm-hmm. So your first project is assisted, your second project is independent. And I think that writing fan fiction and derivative works is a lot like that. Somebody else threads your loom for you. You're given characters that already have personalities, they have relationships with one another, friends and enemies, they have goals that they're driving for, they have homes and jobs and things. And that's not just something that amateurs do. I've also seen, the expert weavers say, oh, hey, other expert, I really like the way you thread your loom. Could you thread a loom for me sometime? I'd love to team up on that. So it's a good way to learn, and it's a good way to expand beyond our own abilities to work with things that are pre-existing. This teaches us a lot about writing, but it also sometimes gives us some misconceptions, some little hurdles to overcome, which we'll talk about in the next slide. All right, entertaining your audience versus entertaining yourself. Sometimes when you're working with other people's work, it's almost too much fun. You don't have to waste time doing the hard part of designing characters and getting to know and like your own characters. You already know these characters. You already love them. And it gives us 2 troubling misconceptions. Number 1, we sometimes think of writing fanfics and derivative works as playtime. It's like playing with your action figures. It's something you do to entertain yourself. And it also gives us the problem of being less invested. Like if we didn't make something from scratch, then we're less responsible for taking care of it. And the thing to consider here, like our title says, you're writing for an audience versus entertaining yourself. When you're just, playing with toys or making up a story to kill time, all the joy of the experience comes from that moment of creation of, oh, I'm thinking of a new idea and this is amusing me. But when you're writing something that you ultimately want to share with an audience, the joy comes from both the moment of creation and the moments of sharing and the ripples that sharing creates. And it's not saying, well, you can't have any fun if you're making it for other people. I'm saying you have to balance those 2 goals when you ultimately want to share your work with other people. So you're going to put the same care into this as you would in your own stuff. I thought I had some more notes, but I didn't. Oops, I should be on. Yeah, that slide. All right. Thank you, button pusher.
You didn't see those other ones.
So, organizing your story ideas. Just because there's already a background and characters and rules in place, that doesn't mean the story isn't yours. You're going to want to write and arrange your story the same as how you would approach anything else. You want, stories with beginnings, middles, ends, characters, central conflicts, so on. Have you ever walked out of any kind of movie, fan fiction or otherwise, and thought, boy, they didn't resolve everything, and that bothers me. You know, that's an easier mistake to make with fan fiction, because if you're not the one laying all the original threads, then it gets harder to keep track of them. So yeah, you'll want to make sure your story is structured and plotted the same as any story. Now, on the other hand, I'm going to tell you something completely opposite of all that fancy stuff I just said. On the other hand, unstructured works work too. We probably spent more time than we'd like to admit laughing at internet memes or mindless sketch comedy or like these simple jokes that are also fan works or derivatives. So sometimes unstructured work works better for getting amusement, engagement. I've got this little note at the bottom here. It says, is your goal to tell stories or to tell moments? Sometimes you have a whole plot in your head that you want to share, and sometimes you just have like a quick little thing, like, oh, I want to take a screen cap of Mario and write a silly saying underneath him. You don't need a backstory for that. A backstory overburdens the joke and weighs that down. So it comes down to, you know, what's your goal? Is this going to be, is your focus beginning to end, or is your focus just this moment?
Mm-hmm. Jesus. Mm-hmm. Da-da-da.
Long form versus short form. That's the simplest way to decide if you're telling a full tale with consistency or if you're telling a simple thing with less consistency. Your long form stories are usually considered anything over 20 minutes because 20 minutes is the shortest a television show could be without
commercials.
Once the commercials are cut out. Short form under 5 minutes, that's just a rounded estimate of human attention span for short things. If your story's over 20 minutes, it should have at least these 3 story elements: a story structure, consistent and developed characters, and continuity. And we know continuity means things are the same from one episode to the next or from one moment to the next. Short form stories, anything under 5 minutes, our jokes, our sketch comedies, our internet memes, our quickie YouTube videos, those can have an incomplete story. You know, you can tell a complete story depending on how long it is, but if a complete story isn't necessary, then don't waste time. That's a great thing about fan work, is you get to take shortcuts. Like an example we were discussing yesterday is if I was telling a joke about Luigi, I would assume everybody already knows who Luigi is. That work has been done.
You don't have to spend the first 2 minutes going, just so you know, Mario and Luigi are both plumbers. And they are related to each other. And there is a mushroom kingdom that might or might not be in this cartoon. And then you've already used up, like, meanwhile, 90% of the people here probably go, we know, what's the humor? Like, there's already an established world that is common enough and known that you don't need to spell it out.
Yeah, this is why parodies and derivatives and fan fiction work so well for short form, because the establishment is already done and you don't have to burden people with it. So it doesn't have to have a complete story. You'll probably have static characters, because if you're under 5 minutes, there won't be any room for growth, and there won't be time for your audience to assimilate any growth changes. And your continuity is optional. You know, we've probably all seen internet shorts where, you know, someone gets their head cut off and then they're fine in the next episode. Now that leaves a little gap. There's a lot of things that are between 5 minutes and 20 minutes, like, you know, old Looney Tunes shorts, or most of the 11-minute cartoons we see on cable TV, like SpongeBob or Teen Titans Go.
And I would actually add that if anyone saw the Super Mario World belly dancing show yesterday, I would... Okay, yeah, some of you are like, there's a what? We're at MAGFest. How can you be surprised? They had a mixture of long form and short form because there was a loose structure, but a lot of it was jokes and sort of like improv. And I feel like that was mostly short form blips, but with also a long form structure because the show was 40 minutes.
Yeah, I would call like the scenes they did sort of sketch comedy, and sketch comedy walks in both worlds, that it sometimes has a long overarching thread, but every moment within it is a short form. The original Super Smash Opera was kind of one of those, where some of the moments added to the story, and some of the moments, like the Pikachu battle,
little vignettes.
did their own thing.
We had a dance number with the Ice Climbers. Only one number. The show could technically exist without it, but as a long form thing, it added a little backstory of the sadness and lack of friends that Master Hand had.
Yeah, it was a bit more of a variety show.
Yeah.
So if you're doing like 11-minute episodes, the sort of, we'll call it medium form, you don't want to follow none of those long form rules, but you don't have to follow all of them either. You can think of like Teen Titans Go, where the characters have consistent personalities, they, live in the same place, but at the end of an episode they could all die and then come back fine in the next one. Yep. Or, the Mickey Mouse shorts from the 40s. He has a consistent personality, but in one episode he could be a repairman, and another episode he could be like a painter.
Yeah, and also I think a really good universe we talked about while we were writing this was Steven Universe. Dances in both worlds a lot, because sometimes there's an episode where he's just after the bits from the fries, right? I just want just the bits, please. But then there'll be those multi-piece things about the super dramatic path of trying to learn more about his mother. And it's an episode that makes you cry, and the next one is like, I'm having a party. Let's have popcorn.
And the characters keep what they learned in the previous episodes into future episodes as continuity.
And I like that they break it up because it kind of also reflects back on what Liz was talking about, tone. Steven Universe can get really dark and serious, but I like that they changed it up once in a while because they have those little short extra blips to keep you
Yeah, it's like
happy.
you need the shadow to accentuate the highlight.
Ooh.
Ooh.
That was a good.
All right, on the next slide, I have a little example of long form versus short form to sort of like some very pop culture well-known examples to show.
We'll take questions at the end.
Yeah, sorry, don't mean to ignore you. All right, so yeah, I didn't want to just reference our stuff with this. I wanted something extremely well-known so you can see these pictures and say, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. Star Wars is a popular thing to parody just because it's so well known, and I think probably the most popular long-form parody of Star Wars was Mel Brooks' Spaceballs.
Yeah.
And a popular short form was the little clips in Star Wars Robot Chicken. One of them, the long-form one, actually had a complete developed story with no loose ends. It had a central conflict that was resolved, and your main characters even had growth arcs where they learned to be, more responsible. They had character development, character growth, and changes. All the things that you would see in a well-developed story or novel that just happened to be applied to this ridiculous thing. The Robot Chicken clips, they had no real establishment, they had no continuity, they chose to keep some characters consistent in some scenes and then break them and give them completely different personalities in other scenes. And they didn't need that consistency.
And I think sometimes they even had callbacks to previous sketches.
Yeah.
No.
Go ahead.
Imagine if these rules were reversed. If you had to watch the first one for 5 minutes, that would be just way too much in short form. Or if the second one went on for 2 hours, I think I'd be losing my mind
Kinda
watching.
like a badly written Family Guy episode where you're like, please stop. Please.
Just ready for this to be waiting out the clock now.
Good.
Yeah.
We're running short on.
Okay, but yeah, the important takeaway here is I think that sometimes people get this idea that structure kills the whimsy, that things aren't fun when they're organized. But the fact is, if you choose your organization well, it becomes an asset instead of a burden. Nobody's going to look at the movie Spaceballs and look at how well structured it is and say, oh man, I don't want to watch something heavy like that.
I think it's probably also important to note that if you've never seen Star Wars, you can still enjoy Spaceballs.
Yeah.
But if you haven't seen Star Wars, the short form parodies of it are going to lose a lot.
Yeah, like
because they're all based on jokes you're supposed to know.
Like if you're not a diehard Star Wars fan and you watch some ones like that go into Akbar's family or other little moments, or the guy with the headphones that is just disco dancing, if you've never seen the classic films, you'll be like, hey, it's animated, yay. But you probably won't laugh nearly as much.
Alright, yeah, so structure's neither the enemy of fun, nor is it always necessary to achieve your goal. Alright, so, exceptions to the rule. There are always going to be outliers. There will be people who, put on that, 10-hour version of Nyan Cat and watch the whole thing. But there's going to be, people who who don't follow the pattern every time. But this method generally works best for capturing a broader audience and also making a longer lasting impression on your audience. You know, if you want this to be something they think about when they're done watching, then following rules of when to structure and when to avoid structure will help.
Yeah, it's like, have you ever seen a movie and you can't remember what happened after you walked out? You can't remember the plot.
Then that was not good structure and not good, Oh, prequels, Star Wars. Hey, Marge, you said the word audience.
Yes, I did
Gee,
say the word
that feels like a segue. Hey, final last point. Because we're running short of time, I want to have questions. I'm going to speed through these a little bit. Anyone from Super Smash Con, by the way, might recognize that there was a Deadpool running around. He kind of stalked our booth. That's why I love that picture. Know, define, and respect your audience. We'll keep this quick. Here's an example of good intentions and the wrong audience. Jim, Liz, me, and Matt, who's not in this room, we made an amazing group costume when we called ourselves the Great Scots. We're all
Doc Brown.
We're obviously all of the Doc Browns from the timelines. And we went to 2 different parties for Halloween that year. One was full of gamers and geeks, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, 1985, 1955, oh my god, yay. And hooray. Second party, hipsters. And we lost the costume contest to a guy with a bucket on his head with a voice modulator. And it kind of hurt.
They liked us, but they liked irony more.
They liked irony more. They didn't really get it. We kept having to explain who we were and why we were wearing wigs and what the heck that thing was on my head that blinked that I spent so much time with Jim trying to program. But yeah, so example, like, great idea. Go to the right crowd. They get it. That's your people. Awkward with the hipsters.
It's great that we're in the internet age because it's easier to find your people.
Yeah.
Yay, future.
Yay, future. I'm just going to speed along with these really quick. Audience inclusive. Whenever you're designing a show, it's always good to have a goal or a main intended audience. We were lucky that we developed Super Smash Opera after a couple years of building friendships on site here and finding other opera people who kept saying, man, there's all these great performances. If only there was something we could perform that was like, I don't know, an opera about video games. And then we wrote one. It's like, ta-da! So our goal was always to premiere it at MAGFest. And what was nice is once we had that, we found that it also fit other venues. We were asked to perform at Super Smash Con, which fits really well. We performed at an arcade showcase called Replay FX, and we even were asked to perform at a sci-fi convention called Confluence. And you may think, I don't know, Super Smash Brothers and science fiction, that's weird. But if any of you guys have ever been to a sci-fi con, there is a track called Filk. That is a whole other fan base, where in the sci-fi world, Filk is fan music, usually acoustic. Back in the olden days, Trekkies would perform songs about Sulu and Captain Kirk on acoustic guitar. And when you go to a sci-fi con, there is really only one category, still called Filk, or fan-based music, and we performed Super Smash Opera there because we had a fan-based work based on an existing pile of characters, and we used references to other music. It went over really surprisingly well. It was fun. And similarly, we also performed the zombie opera at Confluence because we fit into the Filk, I don't know, sci-fi music track. Nerds were there. Everyone's happy. I want to have time for questions, so we'll just speed along. Other than Steam was originally intended to be an internet show for YouTube, but there are some steampunk conventions out there and other events, and Liz's show was able to perform at VidaliaCon, something called the Steampunk Ball and Fashion Cotillion, which was amazing and had tea jousting. If you don't know what it is, do it sometime. It's amazing. And they also performed at some local opera fundraisers. So even though
because they had feet in both worlds.
Because they had feet in both worlds. And even though her final result is still meant to be a video series with like flashbacks and ghosts and stuff, the music can still be promoted on stage.
If you have 2 genres, you can reach in both directions.
Yeah. Also, going back to that zombie opera, we originally designed to be in a gray box, black box theater. But because we were doing an homage to George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, we also were performing in Monroeville Mall, where some of the zombies attacked in some of the earlier films. We first premiered our songs at Pittsburgh has these, a zombie open mic night, also Science Fiction Con, and Horror Realm was a big horror convention. We performed at a horror convention. And it was great. We pulled in a lot of our audience from there. You can adapt also without compromises. I'm going to start with this slide and then move over. We were asked from one of the people we got a grant from to do zombie opera to perform at a fundraiser, but the thing was it was all going to be cabaret and vaudeville themed. Yeah. And we're like, we don't really look like cabaret and vaudeville people. And Liz was like, we can fix it. So we just changed the skin. So even though the setting and the theme of the whole giant fundraiser was going to be vaudeville, we didn't have to compromise our story. We didn't compromise our characters. We just dressed it up a bit and changed the outside. The zombies aren't covered with corn syrup and fake blood and blah, blah, blah. Instead, it's really fancy masks and vests. Everyone's wearing nice suits. We're covered in boas and tiny hats. And it still helped advertise our show. And one big benefit from this was people who might have been turned off from coming to see our show because they're like, I'm not into gore. I don't know. That doesn't seem classy. If they saw this performance, they get to hear the music under a different skin, and it's a better way to, more smoothly introduce them to something they might like.
And it's easier for them to see that it's a fully finished show and not like a slapstick piece, and which they might not have wanted to see until they heard the music.
I sometimes think about, you've probably all been to different conventions where they have, themes, and all of the existing convention stuff is just adapted to suit the theme. Like how every year MAGFest picks a different video game for their art style.
Yeah. Or sometimes, I think this year there's like 3 poster designs, which is kind of nice because you can choose. Someone's wearing the purple hoodie, I think, right there. There's like a spaceship one. I think there's 3 posters.
So there's always a way to expand to fit into a bigger world.
All right, I'm going to quickly go through this. Always find your fans. For the love of God, go to MAGFest. You're here. Great start. Behind the scenes, if you have a website or Twitter, please tell people what you're up to and give them little progress shots. It builds the hype, and maybe they can even help offer suggestions for what you want to tweak your thing to. Support breeds support. Share excitement about upcoming projects. If you hear of other people that are doing things similar to you, encourage them because they're kind of in the same boat, and see if you can help each other and share stories.
Yeah, we had a nice merger between Super Smash Opera and a lot of people from the Materia Collective because they play and they wanted to be like, they became our pit.
Yeah, Materia Collective folks came up to us after our first show and said, how do I audition to be in the pit? And I said, we don't have a pit, because we were singing along with, like, I made a digital orchestra on my computer, and we sang karaoke style with, the pad. And suddenly by the next year, we had a pit. And we actually have a full orchestra. We had a choir. And it's because they came up to us and said, how do we sign up? And we were kind of like,
So really, in that way, most of our performers we met at MAGFest.
We formed the show at
years.
MAGFest. We cast everyone from MAGFest. The pit formed itself through MAGFest. MAGFest is magical. I think we should just have a slide that says that.
But we wouldn't have been able to do that if we hadn't engaged with the fans and the fans hadn't engaged with us.
One guy.
Which I think brings us to the feedback.
Oh, and here's the last one. I'll go really quick. Hey, respect. Please accept feedback. Again, guidebook. Please remember, fill out the little star thing if you have comments on anything. MAGFest is pushing us to remind people that's how they get ideas of who to invite and what to have here.
So when you respond to MAGFest, that's how they know that you like us. We may not hear your feedback from that. So if you have feedback for us, make sure that you send it through our social medias and
like
such.
We have Facebook pages and everything else, and once in a while someone does leave a nice comment. Like, don't be don't be a, can I say dick? Don't be a dick. Use the Will Wheaton theory. Be polite. Help. Remember, these are people probably like you who are just trying to come up with something, and give them ideas of what you change. Or if something didn't really jive, maybe send a private message to us. Usually a lot of us take feedback very gracefully.
We try to use people's feedback when we feel like it fits with our vision as well. Sometimes people give us feedback for a version of the show that doesn't end up becoming the ultimate version, and we have to let go of that feedback because it doesn't fit anymore. And we know that if you incorporate someone's feedback badly, and then you point to that and say, that's yours, then
they'll cringe and be like, I'm sorry.
It hurts twice as much as not using it at all.
You can't do everything, but you should consider everything.
Also remember, like, if you're making something for MAGFest, you only have, we had to design a show that would fit in 45 minutes, so it allowed us to, get in, get out, boom. If you added every piece of feedback and every character everybody wanted, it would be like a 3-hour production. And that's hard to get.
And then for the sequel, when people asked us to incorporate characters, we didn't end up doing Smash Opera. We ended up doing Aria Kart. So we couldn't use any of the characters from Smash Opera that people wanted to see because they wouldn't have fit anymore. That would have been badly incorporated.
I think fans were expecting us to do a second Smash Opera, so they were another Super Smash Brothers. We should have Samus. You should have Ness, and that. We couldn't use that.
We weren't going to say, here's Aria Kart, there's your Samus and Ness.
Yeah, because we wanted to be true. Again, we want to stick true to the world, true to the theme. Don't use characters that don't belong there because it'll
cloud your theme.
It'll cloud your theme and make people sad. I think we should skip it. We have a couple minutes. Thank you guys. I hope you liked our talk. Sorry if we rushed through some things. And I'll leave this link slide up. Any questions? I know green shirt. You've been waiting a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's literary as opposed to a show?
Well, then there is that old convention where they say a 1 page of script usually takes 1 minute to read and perform. So if you're writing in like a script format, you want to keep that in mind. I think it sometimes might help just to physically time yourself. But again, these aren't hard and fast rules. That this is just basically based on what the average attention span is and how these things generally fit into medium. It's going to go on like how you feel. Like if you and your test audiences say this should be longer or this should be briefer, that's a good way to just.
Like for instance, we knew from the get-go that Super Smash Opera had to be no longer than 50 minutes.
Yeah.
So that set up our structure.
But it was
well in advance because we already had that parameter set. Whatever your parameters are, then that's how you put your structure.
And that's one reason why it's good to think out what's your final goal at the end. Do you want, if you're writing something and you want it to just be little sparse blips that people can take bite-sized along the way, maybe follow the short form rules more. But if you want to think of something that fits in that hour time span because you're going to perform somewhere or write something that only has an hour to be read or whatever, not follow more of the long form rules.
I kind of feel like short form really does work best as parody instead of like its own standalone.
I think
but
we have to.
It's hard to.
Cool. We're just gonna speed along a little bit. Hat.
We are very careful about that. We actually have some of our materia team members have spent a lot of time during their day job studying parody versus fair use.
We're lucky to have someone who's an expert in copyright actually on our team, who helped make sure that while we were writing pieces, another big reason Smash Opera is all public domain references. The composers of the original themes of music have been dead like 300 years. So we made sure that we don't use anything. If anything is not from that, it's something we wrote the melody ourselves. We never actually use a full theme from any of the video games.
It's also why our posters feature all the characters in silhouette instead of careful drawings of them.
Yeah, we don't use any of the actual copyrighted imagery in our show. Thank you. Scarf.
When we have a big table of people, it's kind of who are generally representative of our audience. If somebody pitches a joke and half of the writers go, then that's a pretty good indication that it's not going to be known by enough people.
I'm gonna say at least 75% of the jokes that we pitch are not in the show.
So when we said have a test audience, it's helpful to have people to bounce ideas off of. And if they don't get it, then your audience might not get it either.
Yeah, I feel like I breezed through that slide. When possible, find someone who maybe is a friend of yours who doesn't normally attend your stuff, or a family member, or someone who's not so close to your group that they'll politely laugh at everything you say. Always get an unbiased person to listen.
And that also makes it super important to not take feedback personally, because you need people to give you an honest reaction if you want to make a good product.
When it comes to whether or not a joke is too obscure, I sometimes like to think at least 4 out of 5 jokes should be a little more general, and then your 5th one can be something that's only going to land with 15% of the audience, but it will land really deeply, and they'll say, "Oh, I can't believe they included that." Because if you keep those there, but few and far between, people who don't get it will be like, "Oh, I'll get the next one." One thing I enjoyed in Aria Kart was when we have Wendy Koopa refers to Bowser as her king dad, and
Where
You
you're like,
could
no,
hear-
Come on,
Dad.
King Dad.
You could hear the pitch of laughter change to people over 30 who remembered the Mario cartoons where the Koopa kids would call it Bowser King Dad.
And there's
you know,
That felt good.
And there's little callbacks, like in the first show, Liz actually made the Mario and Luigi costumes look like the jumpsuits from the movie.
a little bit.
The live action movie. And we referenced that like, what is it? Why are you we're from Brooklyn. Why do you speak in that ridiculous accent? Like, Mario's the only one who tries to have the Italian accent, and Luigi's just like, what? Why are you talking like that?
Well,
And it's little things that some people are like,
we probably have time for maybe one or two
more. You had a question.
Yeah, you've been waiting.
I see you in the back. We'll get you next.
I'll go see that.
I'll winter auditions. Yeah. Yeah, you picked a big one.
What I loved for writing was roundtable reads that we took all our different, versions of the play, and it was my favorite part of the creative process was when all of us sat around and we read the different versions of the script and we decided what parts worked and what parts didn't, and which version should be cut and which ones should be patchworked together with other ones. If you have a big enough writing team, you're almost your own first test audience.
Yeah, I think, but it's always good to write down. Even like some of us have written music, it's like it's always almost healthy to write out all the stuff that isn't going to work. Get it out of your system, because once it's all down, then you have something to pair from.
And you'll kill your own work a lot. There were a lot of times
get used to
where I
killing
said,
your loves. It's just part of the process.
Oh, I have this great idea, and I read like my own joke that I'm really proud of out loud, and then while I'm saying it, I'm like, oh, now that I'm speaking it, I can think of 3 reasons why I don't want this anymore. And then everybody says, oh, I didn't really land with me, and I'll just sort of scooch over like onto everybody else's side and be like, and another reason why that didn't work.
But part of it is don't write in a vacuum. When possible, get it all out there and have your team all actually hear it. And again, something on paper out of your face might not hit the same way.
I would also suppose to say that if you figure out whose story is the most important and make that the strongest, and then whatever
and
supports
be gracious
that story,
and don't take most important as an insult. You just got to learn to gracefully.
Yeah, it's got to be tough, because if it's too cluttered, you got to make choices.
We're over time, so let's grab the last question
green
as
shirt?
quick as we can.
Jim says 2 minutes. Do you mean Mario?
If they're both well known.
Oh wow, good example. Or the dark video game, or like that bad TV series adaptation, Tin Man.
If they're similar, you can pick and choose. Like, if you were writing, say, like, cartoon Mario and, like, weird 80s Valiant comic books Mario, those are similar enough that you could easily cobble those two together. But when we were writing, for example, Princess Peach, we said, oh boy, some people see Peach as, like, super sweet and demure, and other people see Peach as really, like, taking charge behind the scenes. And those two viewpoints were both valid character interpretations, but they contradicted each other. So we did have to sit down and make a decision and say, which Peach do we like best, which Peach fits in with the other characters the best.
And a lot of times, for us, because we're writing and performing the show, it comes down to the preference of the person performing.
Yeah.
Not always, but a lot of the times we try to say, okay, well, what do you feel? Like, who can you represent?
Oh, and that goes back to Liz's point earlier about you can tell when someone's uncomfortable. If you're performing something that you're totally not on board, like if we said, Liz, Wendy Koopa is actually a wuss and she just hides the whole time, and can you do that? That's not how Liz is. So Liz went with the aggressive Wendy Koopa, and it showed. I think that most of the photos you're just loaded with glee, like I'm a disaster. and it's adorable.
You can do it, and like as an actor, you'll find that piece. But
Yeah.
but like when it came down to like, okay, well, who are you really excited about? Why do we want to present this character this way instead of this way? We look at the culture and we look at the people, and then like Wendy Koopa, for instance, didn't have too much. Like she had different personalities. We kind of wrote a third one for her. Like sometimes you can do that too. You can be like, well, I've already got these people. Maybe they'll like my interpretation too.
All right, so we are just about on time. On those round tables, I'm going to leave some business cards for Super Smash Opera, and I've got a lot of these neat little character cards from my comic
Yay.
books. If you want to learn more about my writing, then grab a character and check the URL. And Liz has some opera cards.
For
I
my
have-
steampunk opera.
And I have some personal cards that have links to a lot of things. And again, the slides, which also have all these links and pictures and stuff. tinyurl.com EF mag 19. And thank you again, guys,
Thanks,
for coming
everyone,
out
for,
and being awake at 10
coming to
a.m.
our
at MAGFest. Thank you.
Great audience, great questions.
Yeah, good questions.